Hello, good evening. My name is Catherine and I work with SCB Housing. This is the information session. I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit here. This is the information session for the 28 affordable rental units that are going to be offered at Alta, French Hill, and Marlborough, Massachusetts. So the purpose of this session is to give a little bit of background information on the available units. I'm also going to cover the application, eligibility, and lottery processes, and what to expect after the lottery is run. So if you have any questions during the session, you're encouraged to either unmute yourself or type them into the Zoom chat. I'll also be asking throughout the presentation if you have any questions. If you're watching this after the fact and you have questions for us, the best way or the easiest way to get in touch with us is by emailing us at info@scbhousing.com. There's some slides that I'm going to be going through as well. You can see the email address there on your screen if you have the computer open right now. So just for some background information on who we are, so SCB Housing, we are an off-site affordable housing consulting group. We're not the on-site management team for the building. We've been hired by the developer to market these affordable units, conduct this information session, collect and review applications that come in for the lottery, to determine an applicant's eligibility, and then to ultimately run the lottery. So in the initial phases, SCB Housing is your main point of contact rather than the leasing office or the management team over at French Hill, Alta French Hill. But further along in the process, the on-site management team over there will take over as your main point of contact. So there's a few different steps in this process to move towards renting one of the affordable units. So the first is to apply for the lottery, which if you submit your lottery application, hopefully you'll be found eligible to qualify for the affordable housing program. Based on that application, you'll be in touch with SCB Housing during that time, and we'll process your application and run the lottery. The second step in the process is if your position on one of the waiting lists is high enough after the lottery, you'll then be put in contact with the leasing office for their lease eligibility. So that's separate from SCB Housing's screenings, and it might include credit check, rental history, reference checks, background checks, that sort of thing. And if you're found to be lease eligible by the leasing office, you'll be able to reserve a unit. And then finally, the third step in the process is after that lease eligibility with the management team, you'll be invited to complete a program certification with SCB Housing. So that's the point in the process where you'll need to supply supporting documentation like pay stubs, bank statements, tax documents, that sort of thing. And once that screening is complete, we've confirmed that you are eligible for the affordable housing program, you'll be put back in touch with the leasing office to sign your lease for the unit that you've reserved. So to apply for this lottery, you just need to submit that lottery application. You don't yet need to submit supporting documentation to verify your income. You're just self-reporting it at this point. But later on in the process, if you are one of those top households on the waiting list, that's when you need to submit the pay stubs and supporting documentation to us. So if you haven't already, there is a page specific to Alta French Hill on our website. So if you go to scbhousing.com and you click on affordable housing opportunities, you select I want to rent because this is a rental opportunity, and select Alta French Hill. That's when you'll be taken to a page specific to this property. It has a downloadable version of the lottery application, an information packet, as well as the jot form link or a hyperlink to the online application. We encourage you to complete this application online because it will be the quickest way to apply and ensure that your application is received right away. Once you have submitted your online application, you'll receive an instantaneous confirmation email. If for any reason the online application isn't an option for you, or you prefer to fill out a paper application, you can download that paper application from our website. That is a PDF there with the application, and you can send it to us in one of several ways. All of the ways that you can send it in are listed on the first page of the application, and they include emailing it to us as an attachment, faxing it to us, sending it by regular mail, or if you're in the Needham area, we have an office in Needham, and you can drop it in the Dropbox at our office in Needham. So whichever one of those options works best for you. But again, we do encourage you, if you can, to fill out the application online. If you do fill it out online, that instantaneous confirmation email that you get from us is just letting you know that you submitted the application it was received. But you'll get another email from SCB Housing after we've actually reviewed your application. And if there's anything missing or if we have any questions for you, we'll let you know in that subsequent email. Again, that information packet that's listed on our website, that is another PDF, that covers most of what I'm going to talk about tonight in tonight's session. So even if you are reviewing this after the fact, or if you've attended this session, go ahead and take a look at that, because if you're interested in this opportunity, there's a lot of information in there for you to take a look at. So we encourage you to get your application in early. It's fairly brief, shouldn't take you too long to complete because there is no supporting documentation that's needed at this early stage. Lottery applications are due December 6th at 2 p.m. So at 2 o'clock on December 6th, on the lottery deadline, the online application will shut down. So it will no longer be accessible after 2 p.m. on December 6th. So make sure you fill it out before that if you're interested in this opportunity. You don't need to be a resident of Marlborough to apply for this lottery. However, there are several affordable units that will have local preference for residents of Marlborough and applicants who have who work full-time or have students living with them that work full-time. I'm sorry, that go to school full-time in the city. Alta French Hill does have a website that's on your screen right now, altafrenchhill.com. With more information and images of the property. You can check that out if you haven't already. It's likely that further down the line, additional information will be added to that website in the coming months. And it is expected that first leases will be available for February 2025. So there's not going to be too much of a wait at all following the lottery and final program screenings for the applicants. The lottery itself is held in early January. So units should be ready for you once you complete all of the screening. So Alta French Hill, so it's a brand new apartment community in Marlborough. These 28 affordable apartments are going to be offered only to applicants who qualify for the affordable housing program. And part of that qualification is that the total household income of households cannot be above 80% of the area median income for Marlborough, Boston area. The units themselves have in-unit laundry, modern finishes throughout, and there's 3 elevators and accessible routes throughout the property. The community amenities, there's a fitness center, there is a pool, a clubhouse, dog park. This is a pet-friendly community. There's a rail trail right adjacent to the property, and the location of it, there's easy access to Route 495, and it's close to downtown Marlborough as well, with shops and restaurants in that area. Tenants are going to be responsible for paying their own utilities, so that includes paying for electric, cooking, heat, hot water, electricity, water and sewer charges as well. There are 17 one-bedroom units that will rent for $2,327. There are 10 two-bedroom units that will rent for $2,537. And there's 1 three-bedroom unit that will rent for $2,717. Those affordable rents are not set in accordance with an applicant's individual or unique financial circumstances or income. So what I mean by that is rents will not change if your income changes. So for this housing program, the rents are set using a formula that is based on HUD, which is the Federal Housing and Urban Development area median income for the Boston, Marlborough area. So unlike a voucher program, the rents are not going to change, except for they could increase or change once per month. Typically when HUD revises their AMIs each spring, there's always going to be advance notice to any tenants who are living in the property, and if there's going to be a rent increase. So usually that occurs around the spring, if you were to sign a lease for January or February of 2025, your rent could not be increased until at least February 2026. 2026. Because rents can't change within the middle of the year. Market rate units within the building are going for between about $2,400 and $3,700. So these rents are discounted for the affordable housing program. Since we know that there's going to be more interested applicants than there are available units, that's why we're having this lottery process. It's only open to households who qualify for the affordable housing program. There's 4 main eligibility criteria for the affordable housing program. The first being that, again, households need to qualify within the income parameters below that 80% of AMI. The second item to keep in mind for eligibility purposes is that the household priority is going to be given based off of household composition. So for example, if you're a 1-person household or a couple that shares a bedroom, you're generally considered to be a type 1 household. You can apply for a 2-bedroom unit, but the larger type 2 and type 3 households will be placed ahead of you on the 2-bedroom waiting list. The third eligibility criteria, households cannot own a home at program certification. So if you own a home now, it has to be sold prior to completing your program certification with SCB Housing, which is that last step before leasing the affordable unit at Alta French Hill. And then fourth, this doesn't come up very often, but households cannot have financial interest in the development and can't be considered what is called a related party. So if you work for the developer or the management company, you wouldn't be eligible for this opportunity. Just to circle back on the first eligibility criteria, so to explain more, income and assets of the household. So since these are affordable units, they're being made available to rent at prices that are lower than identical or very similar units within the building. Even though we don't need your income verification at this time or at the time of your lottery application, applicants are going to be provided with a documentation requirements guide once your initial application is reviewed and you're found eligible for the lottery. So you'll get an email from SCB Housing. We'll have an attachment or a hyperlink that you can click and see this guide. And basically the guide is letting you know how many pay stubs, how many bank statements, that sort of thing that you should be gathering just in case you are called forward after the lottery to move on to that process. So just want to give you a basic overview of how your income will eventually be calculated for this affordable housing program. So income for this program is counted as a projection of your income over the next 12 months for all household members. So that might include, bonuses, overtime, amounts that you maybe don't know for sure that you're going to be receiving in the coming year. But what we do is we look into the past to see what your income was last year to be able to project your income over the next 12 months. It is gross income that we need to count, so the income that you make before taxes, although most of us do not take home the gross salary on your pay stub because of health insurance and retirement accounts and that sort of thing. But when we're looking at your income, as you can see here on your screen, the maximum income limit by household size are listed here. So if you're a 2-person household, $104,200 is the maximum total household income you can have and still be eligible for this lottery. More on the minimum incomes that are listed here in just a moment. So when we're calculating your income, we're looking to see if your income falls below these maximum income amounts. How we calculate your income isn't one size fits all because everyone's income circumstances are unique. So some people have a steady weekly salary, it's consistent throughout the year, but some people are working seasonally or are self-employed. So just keep that in mind as we're doing this. If you're self-employed, we may need to ask for specific information from you about your business. And if you are self-employed, we can take your business expenses into account. In general, any income that you have been making in the past, we're going to assume you are going to continue making it going forward unless we have some sort of definitive documentation stating that you're no longer making that income. So maybe you switch jobs or your employer is saying that there's not going to be overtime available next year. whatever it might be. So when you're filling out your lottery application, please make sure that you're filling everything out for every household member. So wages, Social Security, unemployment, pensions, anything like that, you want to make sure that you are writing it on your application. And then just one more thing here on income. So the minimum income that's listed on your screen, that is an amount that the management team or the leasing office at Alta French Hill has set for the approximate minimum income that they would be looking for households that are looking to rent a 1, 2, or 3 bedroom. So there's no minimum income requirement for the affordable housing program, but most management companies like Alta French Hill here want to make sure that anyone who is renting a unit, regardless of whether or not they're an affordable tenant or a market rate tenant, has the funds to be able to afford rent. So if you are looking to rent a 1-bedroom unit, you would need to make about $69,800. There's some exceptions to that. One being that the leasing office could see that you have a lot of liquid assets. So maybe you have a lot of money saved in your bank account, and they might take that into consideration because you'd be able to access it to pay rent. So keep that in mind. The minimum income amounts are not set in stone, while the maximum income limits are set in stone. Those amounts are a requirement of the program. If you have a housing voucher, though, so if you have a mobile housing voucher like Section 8 or MRVP, you can disregard the minimum income limits because they won't apply to your household. But if you do have a housing voucher, you want to check in with the agency that issues your voucher to confirm that the rents are within the payment standard or the maximum rent for your program. Yeah, that's it on that. I know there's a question here in the chat, so let me get back to you here. Yep, so a question here, and this is good to keep in mind too for anyone who's listening. This person is saying, I live at a property that already uses SEB for the recertification, and I have a Section 8 voucher. So they allow me to use a verification paper for my Section 8 worker to verify a lot of our income information. Would that work for the lottery documents as well if we're chosen? My understanding is no. When you're applying for a new property, you would need to submit all of the information to us. Whereas when you're doing your recertification, we can have a document from your program representative or housing officer at the agency that administers your voucher to show that they have recertified your income within the last 6 months or so. And I don't believe that that's the case for initial lease ups for a new property. I will double check on that. So if you want to shoot me your email address, I will take that down and ask colleagues of mine, and we can get back to you on the info@sdbhousing.com account. Just to double check, because if you are chosen in the lottery, like you said, after the waiting lists are generated, that would save you some time if you don't need to submit all of that documentation.
Thank you. I'll send that over to you now.
Sure, no problem. All right, so there's no asset limit for affordable rental opportunities. You can have a significant amount of assets. Maybe you're retired and you have a lot of money that you've been able to save up. Even though there is no asset limit, we do still need to collect information related to your assets, and that's because some assets could be generating income that would need to be counted on this program. So when I talk about assets, I don't just mean checking and savings accounts, but also the net cash value of any 401k, so retirement accounts, stock, bonds, CDs, Venmo, PayPal, that sort of thing. In terms of your lottery eligibility, so as I mentioned earlier, if you're interested, by all means, please apply as soon as possible. We can get the process started. I also wanted to mention too that if you're interested in more than one unit size, so maybe you think you might be interested in both a 1-bedroom or a 2-bedroom unit, you should indicate that on your application. There's no downside to doing that, but there's potentially a downside if you only apply to one unit size and then you decide later that you might be interested in another apartment size. And that's because the waiting list for these units might be quite long. And if you didn't indicate that you initially that you might be interested in that larger bedroom size, for example, you will be at the bottom of that waiting list if you wanted to add yourself to that list later. So apply to however many bedroom sizes you might be interested in. Once you submit the lottery application, SCB Housing, we're going to review it. We'll contact you if there's any information missing or if it appears to be incorrect, and you'll have a chance to resubmit that information to us. If you're completing that lottery application online, just a heads up again that you'll receive that automatic confirmation email. But in about 1 to 2 weeks after you submit your application, you'll also get an email from SCB Housing with your lottery application number, assuming that you were found eligible for the lottery, which will be in the form of a series of numbers. So that's the number that's going to be drawn in the lottery, and it's just meant to be an anonymous identifier, so your name is not called out during the lottery itself. It's not a ranking of any sort. It just corresponds with the order in which we received and approved your application. So if you're the very first person to be approved for the lottery at Alta French Hill, your number would be A.001, and then we just kind of go up from there. That email that you receive with your lottery application number, it's also going to confirm whether or not you reported that you're a resident of Marlborough or you are a household member who works full-time in Marlborough. Applicants who have indicated that they do have local preference, you don't need to submit any supporting documentation to get into the lottery, but after the lottery, it is required. So just make sure that you're completing that section accurately. It will impact your placement on the waiting list, and you want to make sure that you have that documentation after the lottery is run so you don't get disqualified from the waiting list. The email that you receive will also confirm the bedroom sizes that you were applying to, as well as whether or not your household requested a disabled accessible unit. So if you're in need of a disabled accessible unit, you will have priority for those units over households who don't need the features of the unit. And again, that documentation requirements guide is going to be attached so that you have an idea of what we will need when you, if you're called forward after the lottery, in terms of how many pay stubs and all of that. If you're found ineligible for the lottery, maybe you're denied because you're over income or under income, you'll be informed. You're encouraged to contact us, ask us any questions that you might have on the denial. The lottery itself is going to take place on January 7th at 6 p.m. It's going to be via Zoom, just like this call. And as an applicant, you don't need to attend the lottery. The waiting lists that are created following the lottery are going to be shared with all households by the following morning. The lottery is going to be conducted using a website called random.org. It allows for instantaneous results, and I'll screen share just like I am now with these slides. The lottery numbers will be randomized on the screen. The results will be shown and shared with attendees. And then after the lottery, I will sort the results onto the waiting list by household type, local preference, and whether or not your household requires the disabled accessible unit. So during the lottery, every lottery number is drawn. Sometimes when you think of lotteries, you think, okay, if there are 28 units, there's going to be 28 lottery or numbers drawn, but that's not the way that these lotteries work, because the purpose of the lottery is to establish an order of priority for when I create the waiting list. So in general, it is going to be more beneficial if your number is called early in the lottery, but it's not going to be the deciding factor on whether or not you'll be moving forward in the process, because we still have to sort the results. So for example, if a type 1 household is drawn first in the lottery and they've only applied for a 2-bedroom unit, they're still going to be on the waiting list behind all of the type 2 households on that 2-bedroom waiting list, because they don't have priority as a type 1 household for a 2-bedroom unit. Also, if you're called, like maybe your number is further down the waiting list that you would like, you shouldn't lose hope at being able to rent one of these units, because What's likely going to happen is there's going to be some people ahead of you on the waiting list who are found to be ineligible, or there's going to be households who decide that they no longer want to rent the unit and decide to not complete the lottery application process in the end. So as I said, the results of the sorting of the waiting list will be sent to all lottery applicants by the next day. And when you're reviewing that email, you're going to find your lottery application number and you can see where you fall on the waiting list. At that point, you'll have a better idea as to whether or not you'll be invited forward to the next step in the process, which is to apply for that lease screening or to complete the lease screening with the leasing office. So SEB Housing, remember, is going to be screening your lottery application. And then at the end of this process, we're going to determine your program eligibility. We are not going to be doing the lease screening, though. The leasing office will be doing that. And often it includes things like your credit check, rental history check, landlord reference check, all that sort of thing. So you might be familiar with that sort of thing if you have rented before. They're determining whether or not you're eligible to rent at their property. You want to be aware that leasing offices usually invite more households to complete lease screening than there are available units. So for example, there's just the one 3-bedroom affordable unit, but more than one household is going to be invited forward on that waiting list, which could mean that more than one household is screened. And, you know, you might have been approved and everything, but you weren't able to rent the unit because you were the second one on that waiting list. Management companies often do this because a lot of times the lease-up process is slowed down by households who don't qualify. So they don't want to just invite one person ahead at a time. So to speed up the process for everyone, they usually invite more households than there are units. So if you're the first household on the waiting list, you don't want to immediately give notice to your current landlord. For that reason, you haven't yet been approved by the management company, and SEB Housing, again, still needs to collect and review your income, asset, and tax documentation as well. Once you are lease approved, if you're the first person on that waiting list, you're going to have the first opportunity to select one of the units, and then the person after you will be able to select from the remaining units and so on. So the order of the waiting list always needs to be maintained by the leasing office. So if you're the third person in line and you haven't quite completed your application yet, the fourth and fifth person in line can't cut ahead of you just because you're taking a little bit longer to get things in. That order of priority on the waiting list still stands. Once you've reserved an affordable unit, the leasing office at Alta French Hill is going to notify us at SEB Housing, and we'll then contact you to coordinate the submission of the income, asset, and tax documentation. We'll determine your program eligibility from that point. Hopefully by that point, you've been able to review the documentation requirements guide, and you have all of the information that we'll need to do that review. You have about 10 days to get it into us. There's a lot of information though, so no worries if you are not able to get everything into us on the first try. We're going to be working with you and confirming what's missing if there's anything missing on your first submission to us. Once SEB Housing has approved your file, you'll be notified and you'll be able to then sign a lease and establish a move-in date with the leasing office. So that will be something that you work out with the leasing office as well. And once you're leased, you're done with screenings until your lease renewal date. So if you sign a lease for February 1st, we hope at this time next year you have loved living there and you want to continue living there beyond your first year of the lease. If you do, you'll just need to recertify your income with the leasing office at Alta French Hill prior to your lease renewal. So normally in an affordable unit, that process is starting 3 to 4 months before your lease renewal. So probably this time, or maybe even earlier than this, next year is when they'd be doing recertification. So what we always suggest is if you're renting an affordable property or unit, you have kind of a folder of recent pay stubs and tax returns and that sort of thing. So you have it ready for when the leasing office is going to want to call you in for your recertification. If at the time of your recertification, your income has changed, so maybe you got a raise at your job or something like that, that is fine. It doesn't mean that you are, sorry, just flipping through here. It doesn't mean that you are disqualified and can no longer live at the property. Households remain eligible for the affordable housing apartment as long as the household's income doesn't exceed 140% of the current year's AMI. So to give you an idea of what that means, you would have qualified for this lottery as a family of two, for example. If your income was at or below $104,200, that same family can make up to about $145,800 at the time of the recertification next year in order to continue to remain eligible for that affordable apartment. So there's a little bit of wiggle room there for you to be able to, have some income changes and still remain in the affordable apartment if you are interested in doing so. So that covers everything that I wanted to get through in terms of the information in the information packet. And so if anyone has any questions that I didn't cover, please let me know. Thank you to the person who just sent me the email address. I have that written down here, and I will check in with my coworkers tonight to get a definitive answer for you on that. But any other questions before I let you go? We look forward to getting your applications, and yeah, if there's any questions, if you're watching this after the fact, as you can see on this first page here, info@sdbhousing.com is the best way to, or the quickest way, I should say, to reach us. If you are having trouble with your application, or if you just have any questions about the property that you want to run by us, we'd be happy to get back to you on that. All right, if there's no other questions, I will let you go, and we look forward to getting your application in. Again, the application deadline is December 6th at 2 p.m. This link to the online application will be live until 2 p.m. on that day. Thanks so much. Have a good night.